Hi, I'm Peter Reinhardt, and welcome to Pizza Quest. We're here with Chef David Nayfeld of, Chez Fico and the Back Home Hospitality Group in San Francisco. His newest restaurant, I guess it's not new anymore, but the newest restaurant, Chez Fico Pizzeria, is killing it. And we're really happy to have you with us today, David. But I want to give the readers, especially the listeners who don't know you from the Bay Area, and if you're in the Bay Area and go to any games, you certainly will know Chez Fico. But if you don't, let me just give a few words of background just to kind of lead us up to this. Bay Area native David Nayfeld boasts a venerable restaurant pedigree, having worked alongside some of the most esteemed names in the industry. The value of hard work was understood at a young age for Nayfield, taking his first job at age 13, working at a local produce market, followed by numerous kitchen positions throughout his teen years at restaurants. After graduating from the Culinary Institute of America, Nayfeld moved to San Francisco for a line cook position at Aqua. After 2 years in that role, Nayfeld received the opportunity to work with the chef of the century, Joel Rubochon. And in 2006, he joined the opening team at the chef's Las Vegas restaurant, Joel Rubochon at the Mansion at MGM Grand. While there, the restaurant earned many accolades, including 3 Michelin stars, Mobile 5 stars, and AAA 5 Diamond Awards. In other words, a pretty good start to your career, man. In 2008, with a dream of cooking in New York City, Nayfeld accepted the highly coveted senior sous chef position at 11 Madison Park, a restaurant that not only would help define him as a chef, but would change the culinary landscape of New York City. During his time working under Chef Daniel Hum, the restaurant received international acclaim and multiple awards, including the world's best 50 restaurants, numerous James Beard Awards, 3 Michelin stars, and 4 stars from the New York Times. I'm going to stop there, David, because that's just the prelude to where you're at now. This is like all the early stuff. This is you paying your dues, and it's kind of a dream list of cool places to have trained and become who you are, but it led to something else. So I'm going to just kind of let you kind of guide us a little bit and tell us, where did it go to from there, and how did you end up, after all this fine dining experience at Michelin levels, end up opening a pizzeria in San Francisco?
Yeah, well, thanks very much for that. I appreciate it. So, uh, I've told this story quite a bit before, so I don't want to take too much time talking about it. And anybody who really wants to kind of delve into that, I have an essay that I wrote for Esquire magazine about kind of going from working in 3 Michelin star restaurants to trying to perfect a bowl of pasta. But um, I mean, what it all boiled down to is I was really chasing after some level of validation, not being someone who went to college or anything like that. And everything for me was about like measuring what was the best, what's the best thing, what's the best rated culinary school, what's the best rated restaurant, who's the best chef. And I mean, the one thing I would say is I probably never craved eating at any of the restaurants I worked. When I got off of work from 11 Madison Park, I would go eat at Roberta's, or I would go eat at, um, you know, uh, restaurants that I found to be really, incredibly delicious and frankly, restaurants that I could afford. And
I would go to Papaya King, I think, for hot dogs.
yeah, and I remember there was an opportunity. I worked at a restaurant called CRU in Manhattan for a short while, a little less than a year. And I got to work on the pasta station there. And I think that was really revelatory for me in the sense that I'd never worked in a fine dining restaurant that had a full blown pasta station. I mean, they had a pasta tasting menu and everything like that. And I remember that being really the first time that I really wanted to eat every single thing that I was making. And that feeling just felt different. And when I left 11 Madison Park, I fully intended on, I went to Europe for a year traveling around, and I fully intended on coming back and opening a fine dining restaurant. And I kind of started down that path when I came back. And I think I just realized at some point, everything that I had to say in the fine dining space felt derivative of something else I had done before. And it didn't necessarily feel like I had something original I was trying to say at that time. And at the same time, I was really thinking about what it meant to be an entrepreneur and a business person.
Mm.
And it became really clear to me that I wanted to prove I'd already proved that I was a chef. I had already proven that I could work in the best restaurants in the world and that I could cook. The thing that I hadn't proven to anyone was the fact that I could be a businessman and that I could return capital to people. And so all of those things, it was a confluence of all of those thoughts, and also the fact that I wanted to work in a restaurant that I wanted to eat at. And so for me, I kind of started a journey at that point. This is around 2014. Basically, just really wanting to delve into Italian cuisine, going to Italy 2, 3 times a year. I would go for as long as the visa would let me go. So I would save enough money doing some consulting for tech companies or doing events and things like that. I'd save a bunch of money and I'd go to Italy for 2 to 3 months at a time. And then once the visa was done, I'd come back home and I'd keep saving some more money, and then I'd go back and I'd go and I'd spend a few weeks in Naples stretching pizzas, getting some stupid accreditation which doesn't matter, or I'd go to a butcher shop in Puglia and work in a butcher shop with an incredible butcher that nobody's ever heard of, right? Like, or I'd go stretch dough somewhere in the north, right? And those things were like incredibly fortifying to me. And by the time I came back, I think I had a much more clear understanding of what I wanted to do. So I opened kay-fico in 2018.
Well, let me just go back to that the time that you would go over to Italy. Were you what was it like when you were doing these? It's kind of like, stages and deep dives into other parts of your, skill set. Were you getting ideas? Were you keeping notes? Did you keep like a pad and go, here's what I want to do when I get back? Or did you just let it soak in and then kind of figure it out when you got back?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm of two separate generations, right? Like I'm of the generation of the notepad. And I'm also of the generation of the iPhone. And so I have a full shoebox full of notepads of, me working in restaurants. Frankly, you weren't even allowed to have your cell phone in your pocket. Um, you know, when we had flip phones, right?
Right.
For no distraction, you had to keep them in your locker, right? So, and everything was done on a notepad back then, and I have scribbles of every sauce and bouillon and puree that I ever had to make, and that's saved in a little kind of shoebox. And then probably around, I would say, yeah, obviously the iPhone came out in like what, like 2008, something around then. But then, I don't think it was like fully accepted as like a mechanism for taking notes. I remember like people being, up in arms anytime you'd pull a phone out in a kitchen, or if God forbid you were trying to take photos of someone's food. Like there's a very strange culture around it back then, because chefs felt like you were trying to steal something.
Mm.
And then I think by 2013 or 2012, I think it was fully integrated into our culture, and people understood that like, people were taking notes on phones and things like that. So that's a kind of long way of me saying that by the time I was in Italy, all those times I was fully taking notes on my phone. And so I probably had hundreds of notes that I would take and tens of thousands of photos. And what I would try to do is I would try to organize my photos into albums by, region or things that I wanted to remember.
Yeah.
I would take short videos and always try to reference those. And that was very helpful to me. And then, yeah, so yeah, in terms of ideas, right? Like, I think I got thousands of ideas from traveling. The funny thing is, for me, I never wanted to take something exactly the way someone else did it and do that myself, right? Like, because also we do things with with the products we have here, right? And when we opened kay-fico, it was very much about finding the best products we have here, whether it's the produce, the ranches, the fish, the meat. I would say even cheeses, right? Like we would bring in Parmigiano Reggiano, some of the best parm around the world, 36 month and all these different things. But then what we would also do is we would find hard cheesemakers here, local cheesemakers, and
Right.
and figure out ways to use those cheeses as well. So yeah, I think we would get a lot of ideas from our travels, and then eventually, once I opened the restaurant, I would also, my partner Matt and I, we would take 2 to 4 employees to Italy with us every year, right? And that was really important for us as well.
That's really nice. I would think one of the biggest challenges with all that the notes that you took and all the experience that you have would be kind of collating it and honing it down into, sort of editing process to come up with what you're actually going to do when you open kay-fico, which I know kay-fico didn't first open up as a pizzeria. It was a restaurant, and then later it kind of moved into the focus being on pizza. But when I look at the photos of your gallery from the website, even the pizzas themselves speak to that notion that you said of not wanting to do it like anybody else. Your pizzas, while they look Neapolitan or Neapolitan-ish, don't look like anybody else's pizzas that I've seen. They've got, I think what it was described in one of the press releases that you developed something called the kay-fico style pizza. And it's got a kind of a very deeply charred cornicione. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that pizza evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the reverse engineering of trying to get to a result rather than starting with some sort of format and then moving forward, right? Like, so most people will get a recipe that they like, or recipe that they've found or worked with before, whether they're, making Neapolitan pizza or a New York style of pizza or anything else. And then what they'll do is they'll take that base and they'll add or subtract from it, right? And so we didn't do that. What we did was we started at the product that we wanted in our minds, and we said, okay, we want something really light and airy. We want something super digestible. We want something with a very pronounced flavor profile, something that really entices people to eat the crust.
Yeah.
And we wanted something that had a texture to it, right? Like, not something that was overly soft, right? Like, so had a bit of a croquant texture around the edges and something that held up when you picked it up. And so we knew it wasn't going to be a fork and knife pizza, right? True Neapolitan pizzas.
Yeah.
And so, we started there. And look, I think I'll say to you what I say to almost every single Italian that I meet is the best way for you to think about what we do is don't think of it as pizza. Think of it as some sort of bread with shit on it. And if that helps you get your mind around the fact that it's just get to a point where you can understand, I'm not trying to be something. I don't care if you call it pizza. I don't care if you call it whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
To us, like, I understand that every Italian in the world would not recognize our dough formulation as pizza, right? Like, there's honey in it, for Christ's sakes. There's, it's naturally fermented. We use grains from up and down the West Coast. We use like small mills, like very like more whole grains and things like that. And
So I'm already getting a sense now, as you're describing it, a little bit about the formula, how different your crust is. It's like you can't tell from the photo that it's made, what kind of grains it's made from, but you're kind of giving me now a sense of direction. And I know what you mean about, like, no Italian's going to recognize this, and that certainly they're not going to recognize your pineapple and chili pizza, because that would be
okay. So
that'd be a bridge too far.
Yeah, well, you would think so, and it's funny because so I've been eating pineapple on pizza since I was a kid, right? Like, I'm born and raised in California, right? Like, we ordered food from, Round Table Pizza, right? Like, that was where we ordered pizza from. And then I had like a local spot called Laval's that we grew up eating. And also, actually, I have to shout out to the Afghan family that came here as refugees around the same time that my family came here as refugees, and they opened a place called New York Pizza. And we used to eat pizza by the slice there in Alameda, which was, I actually thought, like, a very good slice back in the day, and they're still around today. But the thing is, yeah. So it's funny, like, we put pineapple on pizza at kay-fico, and it's something I really love and stand by. And every Italian would always swear it's like, oh, you could never do that. It's blasphemy. Right up until probably, I would say, one of the top 5 most famous pizzaiolos in all of Italy, Gino Sorbillo, over the summer started, ranting and raving about how he was going to do this super controversial thing and started putting pineapple on his pizza, which was hilarious. So,
but it's funny how people can change their mind from these very dogmatic positions to kind of like, oh yeah, I get it. As soon as somebody who they recognized as famous or respectable, does it. So it took somebody probably like Gino to open the door for respectability for something that many of us have defended and loved for a long time.
Yeah, and look, I get it. My fiance is no hot fruit type of person. She doesn't really even like hot fruit and like pie or something. So I understand that some people don't like it, and culturally, I understand that that's not a I'm troubled using the word authentic because it's authentic to me, but I understand that it's not authentically Italian. And that's fine, right? Like I'm serving in San Francisco, California, and that's something that's super authentic to me and my journey to loving pizza.
And San Francisco, what's authentic in San Francisco is really kind of an amalgam of a fusion of many different cultures cross pollinating each other and coming up with something very uniquely, you know, cow whatever cow Tao cow this, but there's the cow component, but then there's all these other international components as well.
Yeah, sure. And for us, I think the thing that makes it like specifically kay-fico style is the fact that like we will get whole beautiful ripe pineapples. We will trim them down by hand. We will slice them paper thin by hand with a knife, right? And then we place every paper thin slice of pineapple on the pizza. And so to the point where like when people taste it, even the people who normally say they don't like it, like my fiance, for example, will say that, they actually really enjoyed it, right? Because we do it with a specific type of balance and technical, astuteness, right? We blend it with, fermented Calabrian chilies where the sweetness and the spiciness kind of very lightly melt into the heat of the chilies, right? And so for us, it's there's the taking the pineapple out of the can with the syrup and cutting it up and putting it on pizza, which is like I totally get, and that's the way it's been done for many years. But then there's the way that we're doing it, which
Yeah.
is a fresh pineapple being sliced paper thin by hand.
Well, you're really bringing that fine dining expertise, into a mainstream concept like, pizza or dough with something on it is how I refer to it. I try not to use the other word, but yeah, what you said, it's bread with something on it. Um, but taking it
Well,
to
it's
another
attention to detail. It's attention to detail, and that was part of like the essay that I wrote for Esquire, which is people talk about whether three Michelin star fine dining restaurants are sustainable, right? And my argument is that they're not meant to be sustainable, right? Like I don't believe like there's very very few people who I think should ever work at a fine dining restaurant for a long 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 period of time, whether it's 20 years or whatever. I think, what it does is it trains the next generation of chefs to go off and do whatever they want. And whether they stay in fine dining and open their own and matriculate through that process, but it's training the elite chefs of our culture, right? And I think working in a 2 or 3 Michelin star restaurant is actually very beneficial to a lot of people, even if you're going to go, stretch pies afterward. You have the attention to detail, you have the kind of understanding of systems and cleanliness and organization.
We're seeing that happen, across the board that there's so many chefs who have had similar journeys to yours, not necessarily as, you've had a real, like, dream team list of experiences, but many who have worked at Michelin level restaurants who are now going back. Like, we had Tandy Wilson on a few episodes back down in Nashville, and he, did the same thing. He apprenticed with the best of the best, and now he's doing his food. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say, if I'm getting it right, is you're doing your food, but built upon all of the training and expertise and experience that you've had up to this point.
Right.
And the menu itself is, pretty exciting to see. I want to talk a little bit before we run out of time about where you're located, how that location's going, because it's not the first location for Fico has a place down in the peninsula, right down near in Palo Alto area or Menlo Park.
Yeah, so the first location is on Divisadero in the Western Addition, which is the very, effectively the center of San Francisco.
Is that still going? Is that restaurant
Yeah,
still going?
since 2018. It's been open and it's thriving. It's literally 5 blocks away from where my mom opened her office about 35 years ago. My mom lives 4 blocks from the restaurant.
What's the
Right
cross street there?
between Fulton and McAllister. It's on Divisadero between Fulton and McAllister. And so that was the first. And then the second was in the Peninsula at Menlo Park over there in a development called Springline, which is on El Camino Real. And so we have the restaurant there, and we also have a marketplace where we make a lot of our own products, whether it's like tiramisus or lasagnas or pastas or gelato and things of that nature. And you can come there and you can grab sandwiches and you can grab salads and have all sorts of things like that. And then after that, we opened the pizzeria, and the pizzeria is at Thrive City, which is what is the Chase Center? So the Chase Center is where the Golden State Warriors play basketball. They're in San Francisco. It's in the Mission Bay neighborhood of San Francisco. It overlooks the water and the Golden Gate Bridge. Or sorry, not the Golden Gate Bridge, the Bay Bridge. And we are basically in their plaza area. So you don't have to be going to a game to eat at our pizzeria. You can come there and watch. Even if there is a game going on, you can watch the game inside of our pizzeria, watch it off TVs. You can watch the away games. We do delivery, so it's a standalone restaurant, but it's within that plaza.
I'm guessing from some of the things I've read that you're a big fan of the Golden State Warriors.
Born and raised. I was born and raised walking distance from, where they played, which was most recently called Oracle. And then before that, it was just, the Coliseum, where I used to walk. Yeah, in Oakland, I used to walk or ride my bike to go watch the A's play there, and the Golden State Warriors and the Raiders.
Yeah.
And what
has happened to that area of Oakland is just devastating. All the teams are gone.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started. I feel like
that's a whole show. We'll do a whole show.
Yeah. Oakland could write a book about fumbling the bag. And, it's very sad for me, right? Because this is the area that I really grew up in. And when I got back from Europe and New York in 2013, everybody was labeling Oakland as being kind of like the next Brooklyn. And I really was super excited to see that happen. And I think that they've done such a poor job of managing the entire city. And it's very, very sad to see.
It's heartbreaking, really. I mean, I used to go to the Warriors games back in the Larry Bird days. I would go to the games where Chris Mullin and Larry Bird and, that era where the Warriors were always losing. I had moved east by the time that they finally turned it around. And I know that I think you even have a drink on your menu that's called the Golden Boy, named after in honor of Steph Curry, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I used to get my hair cut at the same place Chris Mullin used to get his haircut, which was called the Razor's Edge in Alameda. And I used to go to the Warriors games back then as well. Like our family came, and they didn't have very much money, but, we wanted to participate in, American culture and things like that. So my dad, the year that they were playing from San Jose, when they had to refurbish, the Coliseum, they had won 17 games the entire season. And my dad got us, season tickets for me, my brother, and my dad. So we would drive an hour and 20 minutes out of the way to go watch them lose every game. But it was like the most incredible experience of, my childhood. It was a lot of fun sitting there watching the games, and you learn what it is to be a real fan, which is like you stick with a team, whether they're losing or winning, and then eventually you get to be a part of them winning.
Well, I'm going through that right now in Charlotte, North Carolina, where every one of our teams, including our basketball team and the football team, are in that phase that you were describing, that you stood by them. You stood by your team when they were there. And now you got your payoff because the Warriors have been phenomenal the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, they've been great. You guys have some pieces to put together there. I feel like Charlotte's basketball team, you have some good talent there. Hopefully.
Well, they got to stay healthy, as we know. But that's again, I'd love to do a whole sports show with you since you love sports as much as I do. But I want to, before we run out of time again, I want to, kind of open up our listeners to the menu a little bit. First of all, this pizza, let's go back to the pizza. You talk about it consists of a blend of grains, and without divulging any sort of trade secrets, can you talk a little bit about what kind of flour are you using in there? And I know it's also a naturally leavened or sourdough leavened crust, which is, again, a coming thing. It's a growing thing nationwide, but it's still relatively new for most areas.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think we're doing anything groundbreaking, right? Like we're using hard wheat flours. We're just using them from local, like mills that are, quasi local to us. One is up in Washington with Karen Springs, and the other one is in Utah with
Central Milling.
no, yeah, with Central Milling, exactly. And so we take a blend of those flours, and to get the desired texture and flavor that we're looking for, we do, kind of, we don't do a super overly hydrated dough, right? Like, and I think a lot of people look at our dough and they expect it to be, hydrated at like, 70, 80%, which is like, obviously like one of the more kind of like trend forward things. And I love the super hydrated stuff. That wasn't what we landed on. And that's not, we landed on a hydration in the 50s, which we
Wow.
felt was good for us with our natural hydration and everything like that.
But you said you also add honey and, do you add oil to the dough as well?
Yeah, we do. We have olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, and a local honey to the dough, right? To add as for both food for the mother, and also for color and texture, right? And so those things benefit our style. I also think the way we stretch, right, like is important. The way we bake, I talk about so at kay-fico on Divisadero we use a wood fire oven. We use a Punta Napoli oven, and that's very much an art form, right? And
Right.
I think teaching young pizzaiolos what it means to use the oven, it's not just start a fire and throw your pizza in, rotate it and pull it out, right? Like getting them to understand the different cooking elements of the induction part of the oven, the convection part of the oven, and the radiant part of the oven, like explaining to them the different heat sources and how do you control those things at different times of the night when you're getting super busy. How do you keep them from depleting too much? Explaining that to them is it's very much an art form, right? And
Yeah, and you've gotta hire some coachable employees to be able to, work with them to get them there.
yeah, sure. And it takes time. It really takes a time and a love of what you're doing. With the pizzeria, we use the Pizza Masters, which I think is a tremendous product. I think it's really, really great, and it creates a lot of consistency. But once again, it's not something that's set it and forget it, right? Like you still need to understand how to make adjustments. You need to understand how to stretch the dough properly. You need to understand how to top the dough consistently. And making
Are
sure that, go ahead.
are those good gas or electric, Pizza Masters?
We're using, I think, electric in that
Uh,
space.
so
I'm not married to them being electric or gas. I think they both work equally well. You just have to have enough electric output to your space.
that
And I just think I think it just has to do on the construction that you're doing, which decision you make.
I'm gonna get back to this in a second because it sounds like what you're talking about is possibly a scalable model that could be taken to other locations, later on, but, uh, before I do, I wanna ask 2 things. 1, how did you train, so to speak, or educate your clientele to buy into that supercharred cornicion that you've got, that almost looks like, like a charcoal, crust around the edge. Did that take any doing? Because when most pizzerias that I've been involved with, anytime with the regular clientele or the old guard, they see any little char on the bottom or on the side and they think you burned their pizza.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think two things happen, or maybe three things happen simultaneously. Number one is where you had our early adopters, people who came in and they were like, "I love it," and they didn't need to be talked into it at all. They're people that just they're open to a new experience, and we got very lucky with like a few very special people who kind of talked about how much they loved our pizza online, and that really helped us tremendously. The second thing that happened was, I think, well, that was the second thing, like the tastemakers, like coming in and basically saying to people who maybe, you had your early adopters who didn't need to be told by anyone. Then you had your tastemakers come in and then saying like, "Hey, this is really good. You should try it." And still, there was a number of people who were like, "No, that's not what I want. I'm not open to that." Third, what happened is over time, I think we started to do a little less char. early on, we really went full on with the char, and that was something we felt like we needed to do to get the bake on the pizza that we wanted to get. And I think eventually, as we became better technicians and better craftspeople, we understood that we could get the full bake on the pizza without getting as much char, and that was a part of that art form of learning how to work the oven properly, and all of those things. And I think we became a slightly less charred. I think we still serve a charred pizza, right? And that's part of the flavor profile, but it's just a little bit less charred. So we came a little bit more to the center. I think people who were dubious about it, like, came a little bit more to the center, and we came up with a product over the years that I think people ended up being willing to give a shot to.
Yeah,
And
you won them over.
yeah,
Well, are the pizzas coming out of the wood fire pretty much the same as the ones coming out of the deck oven, the Pizza Master decks, or is there a difference? Can your regulars tell the difference between the two?
well, I think the super regulars can. There's certain people who, funny enough, they prefer the Pizza Master, and there are certain people who I think prefer the wood, right? And it really depends. I think the main difference is at the pizzeria, right? Like, we do a 14-inch pie and a 20-inch pie, and then we also have a slice window. One of the nuances of the slice window that I think people they may not put their finger on is that a slice window almost always is a two bake process, right? You have your initial bake, and then you have your retherm, where people are walking around with this like super delightful, crispy slice of pizza.
Yeah.
And it's probably, in my mind, the best version of a slice of pizza, because you've rethermed the bottom. It's super crispy. The
Yeah.
hot is really hot. The top is really hot and delicious. And so I love a slice window slice. That's probably my favorite slice of pizza. And so that's a little bit different than what you get at kay-fico out of the wood fire, right? And the wood fire produces something that's got a slight nuance of smoke to it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think both are tremendous, and I think it all boils down to the dough, right? I think if you're doing an excellent dough, with a lot of forethought into it, and really a lot of a lot of quality products and a quality process, I think you can make an extraordinary pizza out of wood fire or out of the out of a deck oven.
That I think you've nailed it, because it's really, just goes back to the artisanship and the people that you're training to produce it. If they know what they're doing, they can make it work. I mean, you could give them, a little kettle to make their pizzas in, and it'll still come out great if they know what they're doing.
Right.
Um, you're also pulling your own cheese there too, right?
Yeah. So we make our own fresh mozzarella, which, for me, was by virtue of the fact that, like, even the best fresh mozzarella from Italy, from Campania, I think is amazing, but you're always getting it a few days. Even the freshest one, like, and that you're getting right away, you're getting a few days done, right? And I found that doing something that day, if you can control the brine, if you can control the flavor profile, you can control the temperature and the stretch, you can make something that ultimately maybe you feel more happy with. And that's not to say I think we make better mozzarella than, like, the artisans who have been making mozzarella in Campania for generations. But I think that, I like the freshness of ours and the product that we get better than the one that we wait, at the best case scenario, 3 to 4 days after it's been made in Italy, right? And if I lived in a place like, New York, I remember we would get a ricotta from certain places which would make it daily, and I remember you could get, fresh mozzarella from, Arthur Avenue and places like that, right? Like, I would certainly consider doing that, especially, let them do the labor, and they have the generational talent doing that. There's just not that availability here, so we make it ourselves. And I love our product. I think it's really, really special.
Do you make it, out there in an open kitchen where the public can actually watch you pulling it, or is that something you do before you open the doors?
So, if you come to the Visidero, you'll see us stretching um, mozzarella all throughout service. Whereas in the pizzeria, it's a little bit more, it's faster paced, right? Like, when there's a game day, right? Like, we could be doing, 400 to 500 people. a day, right? Like we have to stretch that before service.
Do you have a favored curd, cheese curd that you buy that gives you the best product, and or are you ecumenical in that regard?
Yeah, look, so we've done it with like three or four different ones. I don't want to say favorite because look, like it's about consistency and it's about how often can you get something. I'm sure there's a super artisan product near me or around here that I can get that I maybe would like um somewhat more because of, the origin story and things like that. The truth really becomes this is once you put it in a brine, you're seasoning it the way you want it. You're
Yeah.
stretching it at the temperature that you want it to be stretched for as long as you want it to be stretched. Any quality curd is going to come out well, right? And so for us, because we're a growing company, we need something that's a little bit more consistent. So we use grande curds, and we feel like they make a really, really good product, and they're very quality made curd. Um, but that's not to say that there's not something more artisan around us. It's just every time that there are certain aspects of our business that are as artisan as you can possibly get. It's like, hey, here's my one guy who grows 37 of these things every year, and that's all you get, and you get that and you use it and it's done, right? There are certain elements of our business that cannot allow for that, right? Because we have to have mozzarella we have to have it every day.
Right. Well, it's cool that you've, are also training your people, on how to pull mozzarella. It's another skill that, kind of anyone who's coming to work for you is going to list on their resume 10 years from now that, this is part of their formation, the same way that you can list 11 Madison Park as part of your formation. And so the more skills that you can give them, the better, it sounds like to me. So I'm pretty excited about that. But I also noticed that you're doing more than just pizza. You're doing sandwiches at the restaurants as well, right? Is that only a daytime thing, or is that an all day thing?
So at the pizzeria, we do sandwiches, and also at the Il Mercato in Menlo Park. So those are both lunchtime things at the pizzeria. We do the sandwiches at night as well. And so we do them for delivery. We also do them to eat in. We use a mixture of bread that we make our own focaccia, which we've become kind of famous for. Making our own focaccia in pan loaves, which sorry, not pan loaves, sheet tray loaves, which people have really kind of start to identify us for. Even other markets have been calling us to carry our focaccia, and it's been selling out daily, and something that we feel very, very proud about. And then also we've partnered with probably one of the most iconic bakeries in the country, and certainly the most iconic bakery here, which is Acme.
Acme, yeah, the
Our
great
bread.
great bread.
Yeah, and so we've been using them for our like kind of more sub style sandwiches. And we feel really proud about that partnership because Acme has been a legend in this area, and they continue to make some of the best bread I've had.
You grew up with Acme bread. I mean, when you were a kid, when they were just starting, and I have always been in love with their bread. So it's hard to beat. I mean, you got a great bakery. Why, you don't have to reinvent the wheel when you got something that good in your backyard. Is Steve Sullivan still baking? Is still at the helm there?
You know what? I think probably maybe not baking every day. Not ex-
No, he never was, but I mean, he was always there, the face of the bakery.
yeah.
I mean, it is legendary. It's a legendary bakery, and I think they've done an amazing job of helping to elevate, launch the artisan bread movement. Really, they were one of the key bakeries. I think that at the heart of that, just like, in the 10 years later, the artisan pizzerias, sort of followed suit by
Yeah, and we're very lucky here in San Francisco. We have some of the best bakers here. We have Josie Bread, we have Jane Bakery, we have, there's a lot of really, really incredible bakers here. I think for us, Acme, its consistency and quality is incredible. And also they're at a specific size, which we feel comfortable we can, continue to grow with. Right, which is as you're growing a business, right, that becomes a part of the calculus, right? Like early on when you have one single restaurant, we talked about like kind of that super artisan element to it where, you can have a place that says like, cool, I can only make, 15 loaves of bread for you every day. And that's fine and that works, right? But as you grow, you need to keep levels of that artisan craftsmanship there, and you need to make sure that you're doing something that aligns with your ethos. But you also have to be able to grow to to a size and keep that consistency, because you know a chef of mine, we kind of used to joke about it, and his English was a little still in progress at that time, but he used to say, if something is so good that when you do it, it's not good, it makes it not good. Which, you're like, what does that mean? But like, what he really meant was, if something is so technically challenging, or if something's so artisan that once you start to make it at scale for service, that it becomes not good anymore. It doesn't matter how good it was when you did the one, right? You needed to be able to make 100, right? And if you couldn't make 100 perfect, then it's not good anymore. It didn't matter how good it was. So it was, it's something that always stuck with us.
Well, that's it, and so when I'm gonna come back to this idea of scalable, because, the model that you've created there, especially at the Thrive Center, which includes, in addition, we didn't even talk about the fact that you're doing, chicken wings there, you're doing, homemade, gelato, soft serve ice cream, you're doing some really great appetizers, fried cheese and rice balls, and stuffed olives with sausage. I mean, there's so many cool things going on there. You foresee this as being a scalable concept that you could take to other locations, and is that part of the game plan?
Yeah, it definitely is a part of the game plan. For us, it's making sure that we get one right first, and that I think there's brands that I think have scaled things without compromise, right? I'm from here in California. I've been eating In-N-Out burgers since I was a little kid, right? I can tell you that in my, almost 40-year kind of career of eating In-N-Out burger, I've had one disappointing experience in my entire life, to which I sent them an email about privately, and they basically they rectified it in like the span of 24 hours, in a way that like I've never seen another brand do it, right? Like,
Right.
and that is a part of like their allure. But every single time I've ever had a burger from there, it's been absolutely spot on. It's been the vein burger every single time. They nail it. And so I think that there's brands out there that are capable of scaling, and capable of scaling very well, keeping their ethos intact. And for us, it's about finding what that journey is, and finding out what that pathway is, and making sure that we're able to provide a product that we really feel proud about every time that we grow, right? Like growing to two to four, 4 to 8.
Well, I think you're right. You gotta get the first one just right and dialed in, and then take it slow and easy. I mean, there's people now that, and the slice shop concept is exploding nationwide, and a couple, brands are, they're either building on their brand, or they're diluting their brand, because they're either doing it right or they're not doing it right. And, you've got something here that is going to be very distinctively yours, and I want to congratulate you on that. The what you're doing is both, of a type, and yet at the same time, it's unique and wonderful. So, David, I really, want to thank you for everything that you're doing. I want to make sure that our listeners know that, they can follow up on this. If you want, check out the website at www.chef. Well, it says it looks like it's spelled chef eco, but it's actually Shea, or you pronounce it kay-fico, CHEFICO Pizzeria, kay-fico Pizzeria.com. You get to see the whole menu, you get to see some photos, all these things we're talking about here. Maybe you take a look at the photos, so you get a sense of what this distinctive kay-fico pizza looks like, and also, kind of look at the menu and, get excited, because I would be, and if I was back in San Francisco right now, I'd be trying to get the ticket. Hey, can you get me tickets to the Golden State Warriors? Because I'd love to see, even though they're not having a great season, I think that they're going to turn it around, and I'd love to see them.
They're not doing too badly, actually. They're doing fairly well. I do want to tell you that probably the best way to see like what we're working on is, like, we do a lot of storytelling via Instagram. So if you follow our Instagram, both the kay-fico account and the kay-fico Pizzeria account, and then I have my own account, which is David Nayfeld. We do a lot of we do a lot of storytelling around, our dough, our cheese, the different processes, and the things like that. And then also you hear about cool things that we are doing, right? Like a month ago, we brought Chris Bianco to do a collaboration. So you'll hear about those things first.
Excellent.
and we're going to bring other people.
Yeah, I'll definitely follow you. And I advise all you who are listening, follow on Instagram. Sounds like a great way to stay up with the story. And David, congratulations. I love the journey that you've been on and how you've, kind of used each stage of that journey as a springboard to the next stage. And you still got a long way to go. I can't wait to see how it all unfolds for you over the next couple of years.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate you having me.
All right, guys. And thank you all for joining us on Pizza Quest. Please come back again every week. We got some really interesting people this year. And today is one of them, Chef David Nayfeld. And again, follow him on Instagram, go to the website, and come back here to pizzaquest.com.